It has been a long time since there's been this much action. One sad note in all this, of course, is the absence of one name. Our job is to choose whom we think can be the most effective. It's an interesting and exciting race, and all we have to do is vote. So let's do it, and let's make it a big one. We pray that is so. This is Bob Harrington.
Washington moves fast, policy shift overnight, and yet here in our corner of Vermont, the real impact often comes at the speed of town meetings and Main Street conversations. Politics aren't just about headlines and sound bites. It's about people, communities, and the choices that shape our lives. They say all politics is local, but in a nation this divided, what does that actually mean? We're not here for spin, we're here for clarity, for straight answers, for the kind of talk you'd expect over a cup of coffee at the local diner, not in the halls of Congress. This is Matt Harrington, and this is the Chamber Telecast. Good morning and welcome to the Chamber Telecast, a civic conversation series brought to you by Southwestern Vermont Chamber of Commerce and Catamount Access Television. In a time when foundation of American democracy face unprecedented scrutiny and the role of public institutions is continually evolving, we aim to delve deep into the principles that have shaped our nation and the challenges that lie ahead. Today, we're pleased to be joined by Brian Campion, a distinguished public servant and educator. Brian served in the Vermont House of Representatives from 2011 to 2015 and in the Vermont State Senate from 2015 to 2025, recently retiring. During his legislative tenure, he chaired the Senate Committee on Education and was vice chair of the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. Currently, Brian serves as the Director of Public Policy Programs at the Elizabeth Coleman Center for Advancement of Public Action, or CAPA as we know it, at Bennington College. In his role, he facilitates programs and initiatives connected to state and federal policy, fostering civic engagement and public discourse. Brian, thanks for being on. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
So, do we have to refer to you as Professor Campion? Is that what the kids tell you these days?
Yeah, no, hardly. No, I am doing a little teaching, but still overseeing the public policy programs. And it's interesting, Bennington College, I don't know if anybody, we don't usually refer to people that teach at Bennington as professors. It's interesting, whether you're full-time or part-time, doing some teaching, it's just never happened. So, yeah.
Brian, it is.
Brian, it is. Yeah. As long as I don't have to refer to you as Director
Mr. Harrington is fine.
Yeah.
Well, sort of a tradition here on the telecast. Our first question lets us learn a little bit about you, of how you started the morning, and about you personally. What did you have for breakfast today, and what do you think it says about you?
So I had a cup of coffee. That is usually how I start the day. Cup of black coffee, maybe two, maybe three. And I'm usually not that hungry in the morning. So what does it say about me? Maybe it says I just need that extra little boost. Yeah, that's my go-to breakfast.
You and Representative Balint share some of that. She does have breakfast, but I remember her doing, we have to have coffee in the morning. So
absolutely.
We have to have coffee. Okay, great. So we've got a lot to cover here. We do want to hop right into current events. So let's do that. Recently, the Trump administration revoked Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. And as we've been reading, terminate significant federal funding. All of these have sparked a debate about the balance between federal authority and academic freedom, and something we want to have you on the telecast talking about. From your perspective, reflect on what's going on between the higher education and the president. And really, I think some of the separation between government oversight and institutional autonomy in higher ed. And I love the fact that you come from the House and the Senate of Vermont. So you've kind of you've played that role before, but you're also an academic. And so share with us kind of what is your reflection on what's going on with Harvard and the presidency, and dive into that a little bit.
It's a great question. The Trump administration continues to stun me with these kinds of decisions. And somebody asked me this morning, when has the federal government and the states or our cities or here higher education been in this adversarial relationship with the feds. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for the students that they are going after, but also devastating for institutions of higher education. I mean, these are places where we send our students, our young people, to advance, find careers, find different ways to participate in our democracy. And this kind of chip away at them is going to have, hopefully not, but I fear, permanent negative impact on the country. You look at the funding. I've been back and forth a little bit to Boston visiting a family member who's been in the hospitals over there, and it's incredible what the United States can do in terms of its medical technology, how it's advanced the world with regard to medical research, and for the president and his administration to be cutting funds that will directly impact how doctors and nurses and scientists' ability to treat children, adults, people with cancer, all sorts of situations, people that come from all around the world to the United States to be treated, not to mention, of course, our own citizens, is heartbreaking. There's no other word to describe it. Absolutely heartbreaking. So hopefully, and I still do hold up some hope for the courts to stop certain actions that are being taken. We've seen a little bit of that happening so far, but we all, and I think most of us, are absolutely outraged and trying to find a way to navigate to maintain our democracy, and to maintain this country's ability to be the leader it's been in science, in defense, in being good citizens, making sure that we take care of not only our own citizens as best we can, but also try to take care of the citizens of the world. Make sure that money gets to kids in Africa so they don't get tuberculosis. And that dismantling of all of this has really repositioned where we stand on the world stage. And again, I worry, and I think many of us do, how that's going to affect us going forward as a country.
So let's follow that a little bit, Brian. So your role at Kappa, how do you approach educating the students and really the complexities of American democracy? I think you kind of touched upon it a little bit there. I think some of the feeling or one of the philosophies is, we've given so much to the world, now it's time to take ours. And I think if you look at a lot of the anything from Kissinger to up to the current day, that's just not how that works. That in order for us to have stability in America, we need to, and we created that, right? Post World War II, we created the UN, we created all those systems. So it's not, it's kind of like us taking from ourselves. We created it. We created the way it was. But talk to me, what are you telling students? How are you meeting them where they are in 2025 about, what's the point anymore, or what's the US government, or what are the complexities that we have to understand here?
I think one of the things that really helps students, and helps a lot of young people, is to understand what life was like before all this. I mean, a lot of young people have really grown up and only experienced the era of Trump largely, whether he was in office or not. His ability to write a national narrative, and also they've grown up with this I'd say perspective where people, really, Democrats and Republicans, aren't looking for the best solutions. I mean, everybody is so divided. I'd say this. I mean, there are people out there looking for the best solutions, but they're not working together to find the best solutions like they once did. I would say that in some states, of course, there is the exception to the rule, and I do think Vermont we still, thankfully, have relationships across the aisle that I feel pretty comfortable in saying are rarely seen in even other states. The level of, I'd say, collegiality and thoughtfulness and wanting to get along and to maybe having different opinions on how we get there, but generally working for, how do we improve our state? How do we improve the lives of people living in it? So, one of the things that's been really helpful to students, and I think has proven to be successful, is bringing actually speakers into the classroom. In our public policy forums in the evening, bring people from all, who are really involved with all sorts of government agencies, state, local, federal, to talk about some of their work and also talk about their perspective around what's happening right now. Former Ambassador and State Senator Peter Galbraith was talked to students recently with a gentleman by the name of Daniel Troop, who is an expert in Canadian politics. They talked about international affairs. They talked about the relationship between Canada and the United States. And I think that perspective, that historic perspective of what the United States once was and the dangers of the direction that we're moving in is really helpful. So really practical knowledge. And the thing about Kappa is it really is about action. So one of the things we always talk to our guests about and ask them to reflect on is, what do they believe students and those watching can actually do right now to make a difference? How do people get involved? How can they be most effective in a democracy in normal circumstances? But right now it's particularly challenging. And so we ask them and they reflect on how people can engage effectively. So it's I'd say that practical piece of all of it is really a big approach that we take at Kappa. I mean, and I'll just say it's interesting. I mean, a lot of things, it's not a think tank. It's not somewhere where people are producing white papers that might sit on the shelf. Again, it has that action component. We want things to, if they are going to be researched, how do you then bring them into into the public? How do you implement them? How do you get hard things done?
Yeah. And I love the concept. It's so simple, yet bringing back people who have experienced, and really it's interesting that you kind of frame it up. And I think we have to recognize that even in an older state, that we still have people, especially student age, that do not know a world without Trump or Biden, but kind of I think there was definitely a turning point at one point. Could be kind of the presidency of Barack Obama into this. It could even be, I think of how I grew up with President Bush and 9/11, and then obviously the two wars. So that framed my way of thinking. But it's fascinating that we think of this Gen Z and Gen Alpha generation and think about, wow, they haven't ever experienced the 90s. All of us, more or less, we had, if OJ was the biggest news in the 90s, it pales in comparison now to all the other things. Reflecting on your legislative career, former Senator Brian Campion and House Rep, what do you see as some of the most significant changes and or challenges between like the state and where we're at the federal government, let's say over, I don't know, the last 128 days? Do you see kind of are you concerned about that? I mean, we have a Republican governor, which is kind of always good if there's a Republican in the White House, but obviously he's really kind of created his own division from that office. So are you concerned, I guess, about Vermont being kind of a beacon of blue democracy, but even democratic state?
Yeah, I am. I do think up until now, well, first of all, Governor Scott has, in my opinion, been able to navigate this thus far very successfully. And we have to remember, had 4 years of experiencing this before. And as Vermonters know, Governor Scott he is not a MAGA person whatsoever. He is what I would describe as not even a a 90s 2000 Republican. I put him kind of back to the even earlier, in some ways, where he is there's an incredible decency there. And I'd also say that he really is looking for ways to improve everyone's life. And so he's not a guy who's looking for conflict, I feel. He's not a guy who's running around trying to win a race on social issues. He's a guy that's talking about bread and butter issues for Vermonters, affordability, things like that. People don't agree with him all the time. I don't agree with him all the time. But he signs just about everything the legislature sends him. And so it's interesting that he's been able to sort of carve that niche out for himself, which I guess in some ways I give him credit, but I also give Vermonters a lot of credit because, again, that's very much, again, who a lot of people are in Vermont. I mean, the Republican, I would argue, there are a lot of Republicans who do reflect the governor's positions, and clearly a number of Democrats as well. So I think he has become what we've all, in a good way, created in terms of getting along, working together, etc. It is remarkable to me, and I'm grateful that we have not seen the sort of the negative steps or as negative positions as Massachusetts has seen. But they're coming. I mean, they're clearly coming. They're starting to come. They're starting to roll in some, in federal policies that might not be aimed directly at Vermont are certainly starting to impact Vermont. So it's concerning, but I think, we have somebody, who's very steady at the top, and we have a legislature that also is working to make sure Vermonters are taken care of. But in terms of the biggest change, it is that adversarial relationship between the feds and the states that's stunning. I mean, when I was the chair of education, we could reach out to the department. We wanted people to weigh in. We talked to our congressional delegation in ways to help us think about education policy, and that's quickly disappeared. And I think other chairs and legislators would feel the same. I don't know. It'd be very interesting to see how the governor's office is handling all of their relationships with the federal government. But that is a big change, a dramatic change, and certainly a scary change for a very small state that does rely on a lot of federal funding. You look at our transportation budget, for example. I mean, if that were to disappear, the federal support, we would be in serious hot water. So I do commend the governor for being able to navigate what he's navigated thus far. But whether, again, it's aimed at us or not, some of the federal policies that are being made are starting to impact us for sure.
Do you feel, is there a threat? I'll frame it up this way. Is there a threat to the DNA of Vermonters for their bipartisanship, as you've commented, and I think we've all reflected on Vermont just having much more of a true democracy, a day where we dedicate to elections and discussion. Are you feeling, do you get a sense, I mean, kind of as you retired out of the Senate, do you get a sense of the temperatures even turned up at the state level and local level? Or would you reflect that, believe it or not, we're still okay here? Do you get a temperature gauge on that, or is there any concern about it could eventually creep in from Massachusetts or all the way down, south? What's the feeling there?
It's a great question, and it's not one that I've thought a lot about. But the first thing that popped to mind that concerned me when I was actually last year was Zoe Saunders' nomination. Now, here's somebody who is the Secretary of Education. The governor, I believe that the governor should be able to choose who he or she wants to should be on their cabinet, people that they believe deserve to be, and somebody they believe they can work with, qualified for the position, and somebody they believe they can work with, and their team can work with. And so here Saunders is, and unlike other cabinet positions where the governor can say, I'd like so and so, the Secretary of Education, which goes through its own vetting process by the State Board of Education, then three names are put forward, and then the governor chooses one of those. And in that case, again, the state board interviewed all these people. I was not on the state board at the time, but I was in the Senate. Put three names forward, maybe two. I'm not sure how many, but I suspect three. And he decided to choose Zoe. And I have to say, I was shocked by the number of people, and clearly enough people, voted against her. And that really, it does worry me. It does worry me where here a qualified person clearly can do the job. True, had some experiences in charter schools, but we don't have charter schools in Vermont, and it would take an act of the legislature to start charter schools. People tried to deny her that opportunity. So that kind of stuff, it does worry me. I hope it doesn't happen again. And certainly since then, now Secretary Saunders has been officially approved by the Senate. But that was a worrying sign, and probably one of the most worrying signs I'd experienced up there, where things became, I felt, partisan, and partisan pretty quickly, where our job is to look at all the information, respect the rules, respect the governor's interest in having the right person. Again, if there had been something else, I mean, we were watching some of Trump's candidates, people who have absolutely no experience, people who have, perhaps things in their background that are very concerning. That was not the case in this situation. And so when that happened, it concerned me. It absolutely concerned me.
I mean, have you seen anything like that since? I kind of think of this anomaly versus, oh, this is something that has popped up 3 or 4 more times. You and I have talked about that specific episode, and I haven't, other than the normal back and forth between a Republican governor and a super majority in the House and Senate. That's par for the course. But I'm just wondering, have you seen anything else that? There's 1 or 2 other times that I've seen where we've really started to become bipartisan. I can't myself, but
yeah, no, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen anything this year, and it's interesting when you're out of the legislature. It's interesting now to watch things. The supermajority is gone, which is forcing conversations, and clearly, Vermonters were looking for something different, and so and it seems to me that's so far seems to have been a good thing. I mean, of course, we had friends who lost office, etc., but I certainly respect the will of the voters and believe that now what we have in the legislature more, is very much reflective of how Vermonters were feeling. And so maybe it's that people have things have sort of changed, and I haven't seen the partisanship this year that I saw over certainly the Saunders nomination.
Which I think again is a characteristic of I'm hoping of Vermonters where
Yeah.
Where they're it's like the markets, it's there's an equaling out of it, right? There's a change up if there needs to be, and then there was.
Yeah.
And attorneys now there tends to be a little bit more going across the aisle. So I appreciate that in just the DNA of our Vermonters. I often think, Brian, it happens in travel and recreation, and when we're trying to promote Vermont out, and often something I continue to echo is we just can't rest on our laurels. And I think there's always a conversation about, well, we don't need to market Vermont. Vermont is Vermont. I mean, it's been that way since, Burl Ives and, and it's like, well, that's a different Vermont than it is 100 years. And so we got to continue to tell that narrative, tell a new narrative if it requires it. And I, so I still get the sense of we've got great values in Vermont, and yet we can't rest on them, right? We have to fight those values if they're fairness, if they're diverse and collaborative, then they need to be that. We need to fight for them. All right. So here's
and I think I'll just add, I do think there was a period, and people were very concerned in Vermont. And I remember this campaigning that on some issues, even at that point, some Vermont Republicans were going too far to the right on social issues and things like that. And it seems like maybe, and this is something people will study, maybe what's happened is Vermonters are now feeling, okay, as a state, we have this set of values, and broadly, both parties respect this set of values. And I'd even say that with regard to climate, I think a lot of most Vermonters, Democrats and Republicans, have gotten to the point where they respect the science behind these things. And now there's been a little bit of a shift around, okay, this is where we are, these are our values. And now people are, and again, other people who study this, people who really will look back and say, all right, now we're Vermonters mostly. Could they then shift to being concerned about economic issues and feeling like they had accomplished some of those things, and while still keeping their eye on them, but now they are going to take a look and have a more serious conversation about what affordability looks like in Vermont.
Yeah. We're going to start to wind down here, and I we might have said this before, Brian, but if you could have a thesis, come up with one or two pressing thoughts. What do you think are the current, as you're kind of at Kappa, at Bennington College, working with the next generation, what are some of the most pressing challenges facing American democracy today in your mind?
Certainly, first, well, yeah, I put it right up there at the top, is, misinformation and social media. It's scary. I mean, it is scary. We all see people throughout our social media network that repost things that are just absolutely false. And I feel as though that is getting worse and worse, and it's going to with AI and other technologies. How are we going to manage that? How are we going to keep a free press, and one that gives us the knowledge and information that we need? You can get on some established and well-respected news organizations right now and really understand the pressing issues that are facing this country and the world. And others are talking about things that happened, 2-3 decades ago, and so how do we really start to teach young people how to navigate their way through this kind of misinformation? And so that's going to be key. It isn't only young people; it's going to be all of us as well. It's a scary time. So I would say that first and foremost, how do we break through the noise? How do we convince people that democracy is worth saving? I mean, it is not perfect, but it is a very effective and the right system to have. Everybody deserves their voice, deserves their vote. We want this to continue. And yet we did have a president that was elected that on January 6th tried to, overturn a decision by the American people. So those are the things that are really concerning. how did we get there? Again, I think it's a combination of things, even going back to how are we educating young people? We have to have a very serious conversation about education, really talk about not only the social media and misinformation and media, but do young people realize what the alternative to a democracy is? And one of the most powerful experiences I've had at CAP over the past couple of years is when we had international students talk to us about what it's like to live in a country where democracy doesn't exist and how that happened. And so that's another, I'd say, talking to people and experiencing those kinds of having those firsthand experiences and then sharing them with students and others are, incredibly powerful.
Do you find as an educator, I often think, I think my background probably could have originally been sociology and the study of just people and mass.
Yeah.
To me, it's really frightening time. It's an anxiety producing time. And at the same time, as a pseudo scientist, I love to take a step back and be like, this is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have to imagine with all of your background and even your the fact that you practiced it, right, both in the House and in the state Senate, is it ever just like, I don't know, I don't want to call it popcorn in movies, but is it just fascinating to watch what's happening, or is it scares you to death every single day?
Yeah, it is scary. It's and I know we've talked about it. It's how did we I mean, I think we all have our sort of, as armchair sociologists, historians, social scientists, we all have sort of what we think may have happened. And the question for me is, how can we actually redirect it now to preserve the democracy, to bring back the decency that this country really did once stand for, and the general respect. We all have had family serve in the military, either in a war or during peacetime in certain areas, and they put their lives, on the line for their country, but also for allowing people in other countries to have a decent way of life. They stopped Hitler. They accomplished so much, and the lack of respect that is coming, from the Trump administration toward, our military personnel. It's yeah, it's scary. It's scary. I don't know how we have turned so quickly. And I think most people say it wasn't quick, it was gradual. But how my interest is, I know everyone's interest is, most people's interest, how can we turn it back and get back to what we once were?
Sure. So, as we wrap up and we'll look ahead, talk to us maybe on a lighter note about some of the exciting initiatives and projects that you're working on at Kappa and with your students, and kind of how do we aim them towards the life of public policy and civic service?
Well, first thing I do want to say, and we haven't talked about this, is what a service you and your organization do around, creating bipartisan spaces, allowing people to come together who are very different, and work together. And so I want to credit you and your team with that, because that is missing from a lot of society right now. I don't think people are as, a lot of folks are on social media doing their thing, but you and others are bringing people into the community and having, perhaps people who are, support, the president, and people who support Bernie Sanders, putting up a tent, working together, having conversations. I hope you realize that that makes a big difference. That kind of, and for it to also, I'd say, for young people to observe it is very important, where people are coming together for something they believe in, whether it's the chamber or an event that the chamber is doing. And then for young people to observe it and say, hey, yeah, I saw these couple people. Yeah, they might not have agreed on everything, but they came together unified to advance their community. That is really important. And that's something I hope more organizations do throughout the country. I do think, we do it in Vermont, but you and your group have done an incredible job of doing that, and it is part of, I'd say, our DNA, and that's helped get us and preserve where we are today. Other things that Bennington College students, I think, have really benefited from, we do have students go up to Montpelier, they do legislative internships, they try to get involved in the community in different ways, again, to understand how government works, but also how a community and a town and a state works together to advance its priorities. So we're just wrapping up a series where we had a lot of different interesting conversations in the fall. We'll continue these things. And these are also, like your conversation today and your upcoming symposium, are open to the public. So we welcome people, anybody who wants to participate. We hope they do.
Great. And just a reference there to our symposium that's coming up June 24th on Tuesday on journalism and civic discourse. So we are continuing our theme of conversations and bringing people together in dialogue and hopefully putting really intelligent people, both yourself, Brian, and the panelists that are going to be there, everybody from the Times Union, 7 Days, the Bennington Banner, WAMC's The Roundtable. We got a lot of great panel there that's going to speak to journalism and civic discourse. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Brian Campion,
I appreciate you raising them up, because those are groups that we all trust, and those are news sources, and for people to have conversations with them and get to know their work is really key.
Well, I think I heard a week or so ago, when the institutions of government, when we're finding that Congress is not acting, you and I were talking about that before, we're finding that there's some shakiness in the Supreme Court, and we have these institutions. One of those, kind of the fourth, whatever they call it, the fourth institution is media. Right. And right now, they are the ones. And I would even put education universities somewhere in alignment with that. You have another institution, and you guys are doing your best to say this isn't right. So again, very appreciative to you, Brian, and to Bennington College and Kappa. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Great being with you.
Great. All right. So as we finish today, thank you for joining us. The arc of democracy may be long, but it is bent day by day by those who show up, ask questions, and teach others to do the same. Here in this republic of ours, fragile though it may seem sometimes, we are reminded that the great American experiment was never simply about government. It was about trust, about a covenant between the people and their institutions, built not on fear or force, but on the belief that free individuals, acting with conscience and conviction, could govern themselves. And so, when the noise of power drowns out the clarity of principle, when the machinery of state tempts us to exchange liberty for comfort or truth for convenience, let us return to the first things. Let us remember that our sovereignty was not granted by party or platform, by something older and higher, by a creator who endowed us not with permission, but with unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the sacred ability to choose. That is the freedom our founders envisioned, not a license, but a responsibility, not comfort, but character, not division, but a shared duty to know, to learn, to teach, to grow, and to contribute. To our viewers, thank you for being part of this ongoing telecast conversation. Stay curious, stay grounded, stay engaged in the determined, dogged work of democracy. We ask you, please do that. Thank you to our production team over at Cat TV. Thank you, Mike Cutler over there. Thank you. And until next time, I'm Matt Harrington, and this is the Chamber Telecast.